Fox News Podcasts presents the Bret Baier Podcast with Fox News Chief Political Anchor Bret Baier.
The International Space Station has been continuously occupied for the past 24 years. NASA plans to retire the ISS in 2030, but there are new fears it will deorbit, even if new space stations are not ready to go. Private companies are now warning what low Earth orbit without a U.S. presence could look like.
America has always been greatest when we dared to be great. We can reach for greatness again.
President Ronald Reagan first launched the effort to keep humans in space at a permanent residence, but also warned of the need for private partnerships.
The market for space transportation could surpass our capacity to develop it.
The International Space Station is underway.
The International Space Station was eventually launched in 1998. It has circled the Earth more than 150,000 times, with more than 280 people from 23 countries on board. Humans have been a permanent presence in space for the last 24 years. And I guess a lot of people are asking, could that soon change with NASA's effort to deorbit the space station?
Yeah, I would have told you 5-6 years ago, no, of course not. I mean, it's committed policy, started in the first Trump administration.
In 2020, the Trump administration released a national space policy that called for maintaining a continuous human presence in Earth orbit by transitioning to commercial platforms. A big factor is the cost for the U.S. government for something like this.
Let's say we didn't have commercial stations that are ready to go. Technically, we could keep the space station going, but the ideal is to fly it through 2030 and deorbit it in 2031.
But since our interview with the NASA administrator, some at the agency have signaled that plan could be in jeopardy.
Continuous human presence. What does that mean? Is it continuous heartbeat or continuous capability?
Is it a possibility that the International Space Station could deorbit without a new space station ready to go?
Well, that was one of the questions we wanted answered. All of our international partners, all of our intergovernmental partners, and almost all of our industry partners agreed continuous presence is continuous heartbeat. And so that's where we stand.
Explain that a little bit further. Continuous heartbeat.
The only other space station that will be on orbit when ISS deorbits, if we don't bring a commercial destination up in time, will be the Chinese space station. And we want to stay and remain the partner of choice for our industry and for our goals for NASA.
3 companies are working with NASA to develop the next space station. Axiom signed an agreement with NASA in 2020. NASA awarded contracts to NanoRacks, now part of Voyager Space, and Blue Origin in 2021. You mentioned being behind in the process. I mean, how far behind are we? Is it?
Well, we've had some challenges. To be perfectly honest with you, the budget caps that were a deal that was cut between the White House and Congress for fiscal year 24 and 25 have left us without as much investment. So what we do is we co-invest with our commercial partners to do the development. I think we're still able to make it happen before the end of 2030, though, to get a commercial space station up and running so that we have a continuous heartbeat of American astronauts on orbit.
Do you think that that was the case with Starlab?
No, we've met all of our NASA stages. We're not behind. We're not asking for more money. We're going ahead. We're ready to replace the International Space Station.
Starlab is expected to launch into orbit on a SpaceX rocket in 2028. You know, we've seen the influence of Elon Musk in this incoming Trump administration. Do you think that some of these moves and some of these thoughts have to do with the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, before it even gets headed out the door?
I don't. It's a really good question. Everyone knows SpaceX, but there's hundreds of companies that have created the space economy. And if we lose permanent presence, you lose that supply chain.
Also, while you're in an environment with the new DOGE and thoughts about cutting and where to cut in different programs, so you kind of in the background as this new administration starts taking over.
We understand that. As you know, just like everybody has to make hard decisions when the budget is tight, we've made some choices over the last year, in fact, to cut back programs or cancel them altogether to make sure that we're focused on our highest priorities.
While additional funds have been provided for the companies since the initial contracts, a second round of funding could make or break those agreements. Are things kind of at a standstill until the funding is guaranteed?
No, we're going forward.
Yeah.
I mean, we need that commitment. We need that commitment because we have our investors saying, is the United States committed? Hello.
Right.
Okay, so we need that, but we're going forward.
NASA could also award funding for new projects. One prospect includes Long Beach, California's vast space. The company recently unveiled concepts for its Haven projects. It plans to launch the Haven 1 as soon as next year.
We'll hear more after this.
In our last segment, we looked at the possibility that a permanent U.S. presence in space could soon come to an end. Some experts warn without Americans in space, foreign policy could be at risk.
And liftoff.
Our special thanks to all the ISS folks, all their hard work. We remember when Unity was just an aluminum shell.
Before the International Space Station was launched in 1998, the U.S., Russia, Japan, Canada, and 11 European countries signed an international agreement for peaceful use of the ISS. One country left out of that agreement was China. What do you think drove those decisions?
Well, that's a different issue. I mean, look, we're laser focused on China now. China's a threat. We're in a new space race.
In 2007, China signaled it wanted to join the other countries on board the International Space Station. 3 years later, the European Space Agency signaled support for China's request, along with the addition of South Korea.
4, 3, 2, 1.
But the decision was ultimately opposed by one key partner, the United States. What drove the decision to deny research collaboration with China?
Well, I think you'll have to understand that Congress gave us very clear direction in 2011. Any bilateral cooperation with China had to be certified as not sharing any information that would give China some kind of an advantage.
In 2011, Congress included in a spending bill a measure to prohibit collaboration between NASA and China on scientific research. The U.S. argued China's program was secretive and too closely tied to its military. It's clear that China is our biggest competitor.
I think there's no question. They're an economic competitor, and they're also a competitor for leadership geopolitically.
And in space.
And in space.
China instead began developing its own space station. China launched and deorbited a pair of short-term space labs between 2011 and 2018. The first part of China's current space station, Tiangong, or Heavenly Palace, was launched in 2021.
It is essential that for practical leadership and soft leadership, we exceed China and what it does in space.
So you're saying if China is the only permanent space station up there, that is a threat to us, either national security threat or a threat overall?
It's not so much a national security, but what happens to soft leadership? We can't do 24/7 research. You lose that soft leadership, don't you?
It's a storyline with which many Americans are familiar. The American-made space shuttle was the world's first reusable spacecraft. It launched like a rocket and landed like an airplane.
The President of the United States.
In 2004, President George W. Bush announced a new space initiative, which included retiring the shuttle by 2010 and conducting the first manned mission on a new spacecraft no later than 2014.
The crew exploration vehicle will be capable of ferrying astronauts and scientists to the space station after the shuttle is retired.
The government considered several contractors to develop the vehicle under the Constellation program. Over the next several years, delays and funding issues led the Obama administration to eliminate the program from its 2011 budget.
Pursuing this new strategy will require that we revise the old strategy.
Instead, $6 billion would go to support commercial companies to launch astronauts to space.
America's not going to stop exploring.
When the space shuttle eventually completed its final mission in 2011, American-made rockets were not yet available, forcing NASA to rely on Russia for continued space travel.
It was tough times. I think it was the right decision. The shuttle's time had come to an end. We needed to make a strategic investment in our own industry to develop the capability to take humans to space.
America has launched.
NASA would finally launch an American-made rocket 9 years after the shuttle's retirement, a delay of 6 years from President Bush's initial projection. The 2020 SpaceX launch also marked the first on a commercial rocket from American soil.
There were a lot of people who thought we'd canceled the space program.
Yeah. And is it different with China? I mean, now?
I think it's different in the sense that we are still the leader. We intend to remain the leader. We intend to remain the partner of choice. We work very well with our international partners, and they want to continue to work with us. I think it is what it is.
But international partners could begin to show a greater interest in cooperating with China.
We do have to be somewhat careful about technology transfer and how do we actually connect with international firms to make sure that we're not sort of giving away things associated with it.
California-based Arcasys is working on a robotic servicing port for space companies to use while in orbit.
We can provide either the cargo, the supplies, the robotic manipulation capability, the fuel, whatever's required to support a servicing architecture.
The company also hopes to fill the needs of commercial companies in space if there's not a new space station ready to go when the ISS is deorbited.
We actually hope that we will be a bridge between when the ISS is decommissioned and when the new commercial space stations are up there, primarily because we are robotic, we are autonomous, we can move much faster, we can allow different orbital transfer vehicles to come in to bring cargo, to bring fuel, to bring new payloads.
While only Chinese taikonauts have visited China's space station, the country has expressed openness to hosting astronauts from other countries. China already has increased cooperation in space with France, Sweden, Russia, and Italy. In recent months, China's first international payload launched on a commercial rocket. It includes Oman's first satellite equipped with artificial intelligence for urban planning, forestry monitoring, and disaster management.
Listen ad-free with a Fox News Podcast Plus subscription on Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Prime members can listen to this show ad-free on the Amazon Music app.